Dr Crippen is a name that immediately brings to mind the image of a cold, calculating wife killer. A story that filled the newspapers in 1910 with the discovery of a body in his cellar. But who was Hawley Harvey Crippen? And what's the story behind his wife Cora, his lover Ethel, and their dramatic transatlantic flight from justice? In this episode, I'll explore this notorious Edwardian murder case, one that's still remembered today. Hello and welcome to Prash's Murder Map. Hawley Harvey Crippen was born on 11th of September 1862 in Coldwater, Michigan. His father Myron had inherited a successful dry goods store and raised Hawley with all the privileges of an affluent upbringing and access to a good education. Inspired by an uncle who was a doctor, Hawley studied at the University of Michigan before qualifying as a homeopathic physician in Cleveland. At the time, homeopathic medicine was popular among the middle and upper classes who were beginning to distrust conventional treatments, but many in the medical community viewed it as a pseudoscience, and Crippen was often dismissed as a quack. Dr. Crippen's personality seemed, on the surface, to be as diminutive as his 5'3" stature. He was quiet, self-controlled and mild-mannered, with some describing his blue eyes as cold when he peered through his gold-rimmed glasses with an unreadable expression. He had a bushy, sandy-coloured moustache and a noticeable quirk of throwing one leg outwards as he walked. At 25, he met Charlotte Belle, a 29-year-old nurse, during an internship at Hardeman Hospital in New York. They married in December 1887 and moved to San Diego, where Crippen worked as an eye, ear and nose specialist. Their son, Hawley Otto Crippen, was born the following year. The family soon fell into financial trouble and moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, for a fresh start. But Charlotte died of apoplexy, an old-fashioned term for a sudden death caused by stroke or cerebral hemorrhage. Their son was sent to live with Crippen's parents in California, while Dr. Crippen moved across the country and opened a medical practice in New York. In July 1892, Dr. Crippen met his second wife, who was 11 years his junior. Born Kunigunde Makamotsi, she performed under the name Cora Turner and earned a modest living as a music hall singer. Curvy, dark-eyed and forceful, Cora was of Polish, Russian and German descent. With her impetuous nature, performer's boldness and a flair for colourful clothes and bright jewellery, she couldn't have been more different from the softly spoken, unemotional doctor. They married just 6 weeks after meeting and appeared to be a devoted couple. 2 years later, Crippen went into business with Professor James Munyon, a fellow homeopathic doctor who sold mail-order cures from his premises on East 14th Street. Crippen helped prepare the remedies, which often consisted of little more than sugar and water, at best placebos. Cora sometimes worked there as a cashier, and the couple lived in a small room above the office. Despite their modest means, Crippen paid for his wife's opera training and lavished her with expensive clothes and jewellery. In 1897, Munyon offered Crippen the London branch of the Munyon Homeopathic Remedies Company, so Crippen packed his bags and sailed to England. Upon arrival, he rented a flat in South Place, Tottenham Court Road, and took over the business. Though his American homeopathy qualification didn't allow him to practice medicine in England, he continued to refer to himself as a doctor. Professor Munyon would later say, "Crippen was one of the most intelligent men I ever knew." Once Dr. Crippen was established in London, his wife Cora joined him, reportedly boasting that she had flirted with lots of men on the ship during the voyage. Around this time, Crippen became her manager, booking her performances on the London music hall circuit, where she sang opera and vaudeville for around £3 a week, roughly £450 today. This was more than double the average wage, but still far from a king's ransom, especially compared to popular music hall stars of the day like Marie Lloyd, who earned up to £100 a week. Performing under the stage name Belle Elmore, Cora struggled to find steady work and launch her career. She began drinking heavily and blamed her husband, though it wasn't for lack of trying, as Dr. Crippen had poured his energy into promoting her, neglecting his own homeopathy business. As a result, Professor Munyon dismissed him in November 1899. Cora then began an affair with Bruce Miller, a married American musician she met while he was touring England. He visited her when Crippen was away on business, and after returning to the US, he continued to send letters and gifts. It was said that Dr. Crippen knew of his wife's infidelity, but they stayed together to maintain appearances, as divorce was not only costly but socially frowned upon and could damage his professional reputation. He bought his wife several costly rings and a distinctive brooch shaped like a rising sun set with diamonds, which some believed were peace offerings to placate her frequent outbursts, while others argued Cora controlled the finances and spent freely as she pleased. Crippen next joined Dr. Gilbert Rylance at Yale Tooth Specialists in New Oxford Street, London. Though he had no dental training, loose regulations at the time allowed him to practice regardless. He also plied his trade at the Drouet Institute for the Deaf, selling costly patent plasters which supposedly improved hearing when stuck behind the ears, but which had no scientific basis. At this time, Crippen hired a typist named Nina Le Neve. When she married, he replaced her with her 19-year-old sister Ethel, who began accompanying him to his various practices to type his reports and correspondence. Ethel's brown hair, grey eyes and quiet demeanour attracted Dr. Crippen, and they began an affair. In September 1905, Hawley and Cora Crippen moved into a rented 3-storey 9-room house at 39 Hilldrop Crescent in Holloway, North London, where they slept in separate bedrooms and either argued constantly or didn't speak at all. Crippen later said, "She went in and out just as she liked and did what she liked. It was of no interest to me. I was a lonely man and rather miserable." The following year, Cora took in 4 German male lodgers, presumably for financial reasons, though some writers suggest it was due to loneliness. She wasn't entirely isolated, however, as she served as honorary treasurer of the Music Hall Ladies Guild, a charity supporting female performers who had fallen on hard times. One day, Dr. Crippen came home early to find his wife in bed with one of the lodgers, Richard Ehrlich, and their relationship deteriorated even further. Ehrlich would later recall that Cora had a fiery temper, but her husband always remained calm and was never seen showing anger towards her. Crippen's secretary and lover, Ethel Le Neve, urged him to leave Cora and marry her instead, but societal expectations discouraged them and they continued meeting in secret. Even so, Cora soon discovered their relationship and nicknamed Ethel the Little Typewriter. In 1909, Ethel became pregnant and miscarried. That December, Cora threatened to leave her husband and gave the bank a year's notice to withdraw most of her savings, along with almost half the money from their joint account, around £270, or roughly $40,000 today. On 17th of January 1910, Dr Crippen visited Lewis and Burroughs, a chemist on New Oxford Street, and ordered 5 grains of hyoscine hydrobromide in crystal form, a potent sedative used to treat severe anxiety and which he said was for homeopathic purposes. This wasn't unusual, as Crippen often ordered substances like cocaine and belladonna for his patent remedies. The chemist had none in stock, so they placed an order. 2 days later, Dr Crippen returned to collect it, signing the poison register as required. By now, the German lodgers had departed, at Crippen's insistence. On Monday 31st of January, 2 of Cora's friends, retired music hall artists Paul and Clara Martinetti, visited 39 Hilldrop Crescent for dinner. Afterwards, they played cards in the parlour. Clara later recalled, "It was quite a nice evening and Belle was very jolly," referring to Cora by her stage name. The evening wasn't entirely without tension, as when Paul developed an upset stomach and went upstairs to use the lavatory, Cora scolded her husband for not offering to escort the elderly man. After saying goodbye at the doorstep, the Martinettis became the last people, other than Dr Crippen, to see Cora alive. The following day, Crippen visited the Martinettis to ask after Paul's health. When they inquired about Cora, he replied casually, "She's all right." That day, Ethel Le Neve arrived at work to find a note from her employer which read, "B.E. has gone to America. Shall be in later. We can arrange for a pleasant little evening." On Wednesday, Cora failed to attend a meeting of the Music Hall Ladies Guild. As members began wondering where she was, Ethel Le Neve arrived with a letter from Dr Crippen explaining that Cora, or Belle Elmore as they knew her, had gone to America to care for a sick relative. Within days, Ethel moved into 39 Hilldrop Crescent, and Dr Crippen pawned some of his absent wife's jewellery for £195, worth about $25,000 today. Ethel, elated to be finally living with him, didn't question the story of Cora's sudden departure. They began attending social events together, including a ball organised by the Music Hall Ladies Guild, where they ran into several of Cora's friends and associates. Some couldn't help but notice that the young woman on Dr Crippen's arm was wearing Cora's fur coats and her unmistakable rising sun brooch. Concerns grew when no one received a postcard or letter from Cora, but when questioned, Crippen told them she was deep in the wilds of California where mail would be delayed. Soon after, he added that she had fallen seriously ill with double pneumonia. In March, Crippen and Ethel took a short trip to Dieppe, France, registering at their hotel as Mr. and Mrs. Crippen. While at Victoria Station, Crippen sent an abrupt telegram to Mrs. Martinetti which read, "Belle died yesterday at 6 o'clock. Shall be away a week." He signed it Peter, a name some friends knew him by. An obituary for Cora was published in the Era theatrical newspaper on 26th of March, and when Crippen and Ethel returned from France, he was flooded with letters and calls from friends expressing their condolences as well as their concerns. He told them Cora had been cremated in California, but this only deepened their suspicions. They knew that most of her friends and relatives were in New York, not California, and Cora was a Catholic, so cremation would have been forbidden at that time. On 31st of March 1910, one of Cora's friends reported her disappearance to the police, explaining that it was completely out of character for her to leave without a word. All information about her illness and death had come solely from her husband, Hawley Harvey Crippen. Chief Inspector Walter Dew of Scotland Yard, who had served as a detective constable in Whitechapel during the Jack the Ripper murders of 1888, was initially sceptical. He explained that without more evidence, there was little they could do, as Cora was just one of many missing persons in London. He even privately suspected she had eloped with a lover. 3 months later, 2 more of Cora's friends reported their suspicions when they heard the news after returning from a music hall tour in America. Crippen's story struck them as deeply unconvincing. On Friday 8th of July, Chief Inspector Dew and Detective Sergeant Mitchell questioned Crippen. He did not try to hide his relationship with Ethel and calmly admitted that his earlier account of his wife's death was false. He now claimed Cora had gone to America with her former lover Bruce Miller, and that after the Martinettis' dinner visit, she had told him she was leaving. "She said that this is the end of it," he explained quietly. "I shall leave you tomorrow, and you'll never hear from me again." She had said this so often, I didn't take much notice of it, but she did say one thing, which she had never said before, that I was to arrange to cover up any scandal with our friends and the guild the best way I could. He claimed that the next day he had returned home from work to find her gone. He invented the story of her illness and death to avoid the scandal they had both wanted to avoid. When asked why she had left behind so many clothes and valuables, Crippen replied without hesitation that Cora had told him she didn't want anything he had bought for her. The statement took several hours to complete, with Chief Inspector Dew and Dr Crippen pausing for lunch together at an Italian restaurant. Afterwards, Crippen invited Dew to search his home, but his officers found nothing suspicious. Dew advised him to contact his wife in America and urged her to come forward to dispel any rumours that he had killed her. Crippen agreed, even drafting a newspaper advertisement, but he never sent it. The next day, Dew reread Crippen's statement and decided to revisit Hilldrop Crescent to clarify a few details. On Monday 11th of July, he knocked at the door but found no one home. At Yale Tooth Specialists, Crippen's business partner, Dr Rylance, informed him that Crippen had left a note saying he would be away for some time. Intriguingly, just before leaving, he had sent a young office assistant out to purchase clothing suitable for a boy. It was clear that Crippen and Ethel had fled, with Ethel likely disguised as a boy, an act that strongly suggested guilt. What had begun as a routine inquiry that Dew initially saw as a nuisance had now become a full-scale manhunt for a suspected murderer. Police searched Crippen's home and garden, digging up every rose bush and turning over every inch of soil, but found nothing. It was only after 2 days of searching that they realised they hadn't yet inspected the coal cellar, a dark, dusty space at the end of a narrow corridor leading from the kitchen to the back door. Chief Inspector Dew noticed some loose bricks in the floor and his team began digging. 6 inches down, a putrid smell rose up to meet them. They had found what they were looking for. Buried beneath the coal cellar floor was a decaying torso, wrapped in a pyjama jacket. A warrant was immediately issued for the arrest of the couple on the run. Dr. Joseph Pepper and Dr. Bernard Spilsbury examined the torso. The murderer had removed the head, limbs and genital organs, then covered the remains in lime instead of quicklime, which had acted as a preservative rather than accelerating decomposition. They concluded that the torso was that of a well-built female and identified a scar on her abdomen which indicated that at some time one of her ovaries had been removed, an operation that Cora Crippen had undergone several years earlier. Traces of hyoscine were found in the body, which would have caused delirium and unconsciousness within an hour, followed by paralysis and death within 12 hours. A metal hair curler was found alongside the remains with a lock of hair coiled around it, several inches in length, dark brown at the roots and blonde at the tips. Cora Crippen had used peroxide to bleach her hair, so all the signs indicated that the body was hers. The pyjama jacket wrapped around the torso was labelled Jones Brothers of Holloway, and police inquiries confirmed that the garment was purchased for Dr. Crippen after they moved into Hilldrop Crescent, meaning there was no chance the body could be that of some other murder victim killed by the previous owner. While detectives pieced together the evidence, the world was on high alert for the killer doctor and his girlfriend. The news was splashed across every newspaper, and Crippen fever led to a wave of reported sightings landing on Chief Inspector Dew's desk almost hourly. Some swore they had spotted Crippen in Essex, carrying a sinister-looking Gladstone bag, while in Willesden, North London, an innocent man who resembled the deadly physician was chased by a mob before being rescued by police. One report placed him sightseeing in the Pyrenees, while another unfortunate look-alike, dressed as a vicar, was questioned in New York. It was Captain Henry Kendall of the SS Montrose who raised the alarm about the real Crippen. On 9th of July, 47-year-old Dr. Crippen and 27-year-old Ethel Le Neve had fled London. Ethel, disguised as a boy, with her hair cut short, posed as Crippen's son, but the trousers, not made for a woman's figure, split as she pulled them on. Crippen shaved off his moustache and removed his glasses, though he struggled to see without them. They caught a train from Liverpool Street to Harwich, then a night boat to Holland. After lying low at a hotel for 8 nights, they boarded the transatlantic steamer bound for Canada. When they boarded the SS Montrose as John Robinson and his 16-year-old son, the captain and several crew members noticed that the two seemed overly affectionate, and when they thought no one was watching, they held hands. The boys' clothes were ill-fitting, and a tear in the trousers had been clumsily pinned together. The eagle-eyed Captain Kendall also observed that although Mr. Robinson didn't wear spectacles, he had a mark on the bridge of his nose that suggested he usually did. His son had strikingly feminine features and was slightly taller than his supposed father. Before the ship had departed, Kendall had seen the newspapers and knew police were searching for a man travelling with a woman disguised as his son, so he decided to test his theory. On several occasions, he called out to Mr. Robinson while passing them on deck, but the man didn't respond until prompted by his son, later claiming that the cold sea air had affected his hearing. Kendall compared their appearance to photographs of the fugitives printed in the Daily Mail, and despite their disguises, The resemblance was undeniable. To get a closer look, he invited them to dine at his table. Young Master Robinson barely said a word during the meal, but displayed conspicuously ladylike table manners. Captain Kendall asked his wireless operator to send a message to the ship's owners in Liverpool, which was relayed to Scotland Yard. It ran, "Have strong suspicions that Crippen London cellar murderer and accomplice are amongst saloon passengers. Moustache taken off, growing beard. Accomplice dressed as boy. Voice, manner and build undoubtedly a girl. Travelling as Mr. and Master Robinson." He continued sending daily updates back to England, while the Daily Mail gripped the public with reports of the drama unfolding on the ocean. Crippen and Le Neve, unaware they'd been identified, waited anxiously for the ship to arrive in Canada so they could slip away and start the next chapter of their lives free from scrutiny. As soon as word reached London, Chief Inspector Dew set sail from Liverpool aboard the Atlantic, taking his own turn at travelling incognito as Mr. Dewhurst. In truth, he needn't have bothered, as the British press was already reporting on his mission, gleefully tracking the Atlantic gaining on the SS Montrose at a rate of 3.5 miles an hour in a thrilling transatlantic sea chase. On the morning of Sunday 31st of July, a thick sea fog lifted to reveal a rowing boat making its way steadily towards the SS Montrose, which had been dispatched from the Atlantic. As the boat pulled alongside, Dr Crippen, standing near the rail and admiring the St Lawrence River, noticed 4 sailors aboard, along with 3 men in the blue uniforms of maritime pilots, who typically boarded near ports or tricky waterways to guide ships through local waters. The Montrose's surgeon, Dr Stewart, happened to be passing, and Crippen asked with curiosity laced with unease, "3 pilots coming on board? Isn't that unusual?" He had no idea they weren't pilots at all, but Chief Inspector Dew and 2 Canadian police officers. Moments later, Dew and his men climbed aboard via a rope ladder and made their way straight to Crippen. On recognising the Chief Inspector, Crippen knew the game was up. With a mix of resignation and relief that the nerve-wracking deception was over, he allowed himself to be arrested without resistance. Dew then went to cabin 5, where he found Ethel dressed as Master John Robinson. "Miss Le Neve?" he asked. "I'm Chief Inspector Dew." She reportedly looked at him, screamed, and fainted. When she recovered, she changed into women's clothes, and both prisoners were confined to separate cabins. The story was captured by a shipload of journalists who had pulled up alongside the Montrose and were allowed to report on their arrest, though it had proved far less dramatic than they had hoped after such a sensational pursuit across the ocean. The case also made history, as it was the first time wireless telegraphy had been used to apprehend a fleeing criminal. Crippen and Le Neve spent 19 days in a Montreal prison before being returned to England to stand trial. Throughout, Crippen insisted Ethel was innocent and frequently asked about her welfare, in despair at being separated from her. When the ship docked in Liverpool on 28th of August, the ill-fated lovers were met by a hostile crowd who booed and jeered as they disembarked. One man attempted to lunge at Crippen on the gangplank, but was restrained by police. Ethel followed quietly, her face hidden beneath a blue veil. Dr Hawley Harvey Crippen stood trial at the Old Bailey on Tuesday 18th of October 1910 before Lord Chief Justice Alverston. The prosecution was led by Mr Richard Muir, the defence by Alfred Tobin, and the trial dominated the press to such an extent that 4,000 people applied for a seat in the courtroom. Crippen had regrown his distinctive moustache and appeared characteristically calm in the dock, which the Daily Mail described as a marvellous exhibition of nerve power. He argued that the remains found in his cellar did not belong to his wife Cora, but he could provide no evidence that she was still alive, nor any clue as to the victim's identity. The defence claimed there was no definite proof the torso was female, but the abdominal scar, consistent with the removal of an ovary, and the long strand of dyed hair coiled around a metal curler strongly suggested it. Dr. Joseph Pepper of the Royal College of Surgeons, with 35 years' experience, testified that the remains could not have been buried for more than 8 months. This, combined with the date the pyjama jacket was purchased, ruled out the possibility that the body had been there before the Crippens moved in. In court, the piece of skin bearing the telltale scar was presented in a soup dish, alongside the scrap of pyjama fabric. The rest of the body was never found. Some speculated that the missing limbs and head had been packed in a suitcase and thrown overboard when Crippen and Le Neve travelled to France, several months before Cora's friends raised the alarm. After a 5-day trial, the jury just took 27 minutes to find Dr. Crippen guilty of murdering his wife. The Lord Chief Justice donned the feared black cap and passed the sentence of death. When asked if he had anything to say, Crippen calmly replied, "I still protest my innocence." Tried separately as an accessory after the fact, Ethel Le Neve was acquitted and released. Crippen's appeal was swiftly dismissed, and his execution was set for 23rd of November. 5 days before the hanging, his father Myron Crippen died in Los Angeles, reportedly of old age, though newspapers suggested his grief over the crime had hastened his end. More than 15,000 people signed a petition for clemency, but Home Secretary Winston Churchill rejected the plea. 3 days before his death, Crippen issued a public statement, once again asserting Ethel's innocence. He said, "Her mind was beautiful to me. Whatever sin there was, and we broke the law, it was my sin, not hers. As I face eternity, I say that Ethel Le Neve has loved me as few women love men, and that her innocence of any crime is absolute." He then wrote to his lover, "There are less than 2 days left to us. Only one more letter after this can I write to you, and only 2 more visits. Your letter, written early Saturday, came to me last Saturday evening, and soon after, the governor brought me the dreadful news. When he was gone, I kissed your face in the photo. It was some consolation, although in spite of all my greatest efforts, it was impossible to keep down a great sob and my heart's agonised cry." On Tuesday 22nd of November, Ethel Le Neve visited Dr. Crippen for the last time. The following morning, he was hanged at Pentonville Prison, never confessing to his wife's murder. His final wish was that a photograph of Ethel and her letters be buried with him. Chief Inspector Dew, then aged 47, retired shortly before the execution. 28 years later, he published his memoirs and died in 1947, aged 84. Ethel Le Neve moved to Toronto, Canada, where she worked as a typist, later returning to England under a different name to care for her dying sister. She eventually married an upholstery clerk named Stanley Smith, who was said to resemble Dr. Crippen. The couple had 2 children before Stanley's death in 1943, remaining unaware of her true identity. Ethel, later known as Ethel Harvey, died in 1967 at the age of 84, and apparently requested to be buried with a locket containing a photograph of Crippen, proof of an everlasting passion that had survived long after the lever was pulled and the trapdoor opened. Captain Henry Kendall received a reward of £250, worth about $30,000 today, for his role in capturing the escaped murderer. In a twist of fate, he survived the sinking of the Empress of Ireland in May 1914, a ship that, just months earlier, had transported naval engineer Kent Reeks from Canada to England, where he fell victim to a murderer who was never caught, in a mysterious case which I covered in a previous episode. I'll leave a link in the show notes. The truth about Cora Crippen's death may never be fully known. Dr Crippen portrayed himself as a long-suffering husband who tried to provide a comfortable life despite their love having long since faded. Some believe Crippen killed her to free himself from their marriage, avoiding the expense and public stigma of divorce. A more sympathetic theory, supported by eminent barrister Sir Edward Marshall Hall and depicted in the 1963 film starring Donald Pleasance, suggests her death was accidental. According to this view, Cora had a voracious sexual appetite, and Crippen had begun secretly dosing her with hyoscine as an anti-aphrodisiac. Could he have accidentally overdosed her while intending only to sedate her so he could spend the night with Ethel? Otto Crippen, Dr Crippen's son from his first marriage, went on to marry, served in the First World War, and lived a quiet life until his death in the 1970s. 39 Hilldrop Crescent was bombed during the Blitz in 1940 and reduced to rubble. It was rebuilt in the 1950s as a block of flats, where residents claimed to hear strange noises at night, and one woman even reported seeing a figure wearing an old-fashioned black hat and cape. Even decades after its destruction, the reputation of the Edwardian House of Horrors lives on, along with the memory of Dr Hawley Harvey Crippen, whose wax likeness was displayed at Madame Tussauds for many years before being removed, though his spectacles remain available for public viewing. The spade Chief Inspector Dew used to unearth the remains in the coal cellar was later kept on view for a time in a private collection of London's Crime Museum. In 2007, American academics claimed that DNA tests showed the torso did not match Cora's distant relatives, suggesting that the body was not hers after all. However, these findings were widely dismissed in scientific circles. It seems improbable that another woman's body would have been buried in Crippen's coal cellar, wrapped in his pyjama jacket, and it's clear that however the death occurred, he had tried to dispose of the body and knowingly fled. The only lingering question is whether it was premeditated murder, a moment of rage, or an unfortunate accident, and whether Ethel Le Neve was complicit or truly innocent, as Crippen insisted. You've been listening to Prash's Murder Map. Thanks for tuning in, it means a lot. Please follow and rate the show wherever you get your podcasts, and if you're on YouTube, remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. I'll be back soon with another true crime story.